Thanks, Simon. Yeah, thanks for joining us this morning for DSA Virtual Access. Today, we're looking at Seattle Politics and Elections 2023. You know, the Mariners season is well underway. The Kraken season is in extra innings. They do play innings in hockey, right? Anyway, I know that's a mixed metaphor. Actually, historic note here, when the Kraken take the ice Saturday night at Climate Pledge Arena, it will be the first time a Stanley Cup playoffs game has been held in Seattle since March 26th, 1919. It's about time. Now, along with baseball and hockey, election season is here now, too. We've got a King County measure on the ballot next Tuesday. And then this August, we'll see one of the most active primary ballots for the Seattle City Council in many, many years. As many as 8 of 9 city council seats will be up for grabs, and there's no doubt the cast of characters will be very different than the current gang at City Hall when January 2024 rolls around. Now, politics at every level feels pretty divisive and extreme, focused on hot button issues. But meanwhile, back in Seattle, we've got a city that we all love that needs a highly functional legislative body to address the challenges and seize the opportunities. And as a reminder, as if anyone needs it, we're still coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of the indicators are good, and all of Seattle, and especially downtown, has most of the ingredients necessary to bounce back and thrive again in a world that's pretty different from 2019. And so maybe our politics will have to adapt as well. To go deep on the data and debate about what's ahead in this Seattle election year, we couldn't have a better panel with us this morning. Tim Cease is a partner at CBE Strategic. Tim has had a long career in city, county, and state government. He was deputy mayor for the city of Seattle from 2002 to 2010, where he oversaw city departments, including all policy and operational issues. As a partner at Cease Bain East Strategic, Tim has worked with a diverse set of clients, including labor unions, business, transportation agencies, government, and nonprofits. Andrew Tebow is senior principal at EMC Research. Andrew joined EMC Research in 1995 after working his way through college as an analyst at a leading national political polling firm. He works with a wide variety of clients. He's particularly proud of his work on projects that have helped improve the quality of life in the Northwest, including helping raise the minimum wage, expand public transit and infrastructure investment, and improve parks and open space. Kylie Rolfe is VP of Advocacy and Economic Development for the Downtown Seattle Association. She joined DSA in the fall of 2021. She oversees advocacy efforts on issues of key concern to DSA members, MID, the mid ratepayers, and other downtown stakeholders. She previously worked as Mayor Jenny Durkin's Director of Legislative Affairs and Major Initiatives, where she helped lead and oversee a variety of projects ranging from housing and homelessness to worker protections to funding initiatives for education and public facilities. All right, now we have some questions we prepared in advance, and we'll get to audience questions all throughout the program. So go ahead and use the chat function. All of us pay attention to that. We try to weave those into our conversation. Before we begin these conversations, what we typically do is start with just a few kind of bullet points about data. But since this is about elections, and elections love polling and vice versa, we're going to start going with a deep dive on some recent polling that Andrew Tebow conducted. And Andrew, you have some data to share with us and some analysis.
Yeah, I think, this is all research conducted with registered voters, so the kind of the broadest voter population. So to set the overall context of this discussion, one of the broad questions we ask is how optimistic or pessimistic people are about the overall direction of the city. And it's still a strong majority are pessimistic about the direction of the city. But the good news is that people are less pessimistic. So notice I didn't say more optimistic, but pessimism is coming down. I think we're at a point where people are kind of pausing. They've seen some positive progress, but they're not yet convinced that that will be sustained. And so they're kind of waiting in there. But there is really a pent-up demand to be optimistic about the city again. One of the other things that really helps us understand the broader context, we asked this question, what are you most frustrated or concerned about in terms of issues facing the city of Seattle? That's been really, really consistent over the last 5, 6, 7 years, with homelessness at the top of the list. So issues related to homelessness. One of the things that spiked recently is concerns about public safety. And these things are really interrelated in voters' minds right now. We did a survey specifically about public safety, and we asked, what are the public safety issues facing Seattle that you are most concerned about? And the top response for public safety issue was homelessness and lack of housing, because people are seeing the additional consequences of people not having housing, and they're starting to conflate those issues a little bit. So these are really the two top of mind concerns for voters right now. And a lot of the focus of this election, what voters are going to be looking for is people who have ideas and solutions and want to move the ball forward on homelessness and public safety. The other issues that are consistently receive a lot of mentions, affordability, of course, and that's not just about housing, but also cost of living. And none of this is surprising to anyone. The other thing that's been pretty consistent has been concerns about downtown and downtown recovery. So voters recognize how critical downtown's success is to the region's economic success and to the city and the region's success. They're concerned about the future of downtown, and they really understand that unless we address public safety and homelessness issues downtown, downtown is going to have a hard time recovering. And in the past, we've done research outside of Seattle, so King County. It is not just voters in the city of Seattle who are concerned about downtown. Voters outside of Seattle are also deeply concerned about downtown. They recognize how central it is to the success of the region, and they want something to be done about it. So I think that's the broad overview. In terms of City Hall, the mayor continues to be quite popular with voters, despite their concern about the direction of the city. They're not blaming the mayor for that. That is really all falling on the city council, and the city council is historically unpopular right now. So there's a real dichotomy there in terms of where voter pessimism is landing, and it's squarely on the council.
Quick question about that pessimism. Why are people less pessimistic? Maybe that's a dumb, obvious question, but why would you say, based on the polling results or what you know about the city, why are people less pessimistic than they were a year ago?
Yeah, I think they're starting to see signs of progress and function. I had said it, that things are moving forward. But if we think about how long these problems have been front and center, it's going to take a while before voters believe that this is sustained progress that leads to improvements in quality of life. If you think about why people move here and stay here, it really is fundamentally about quality of life. And if you ask people what they love about being in Seattle, it really is, the outdoors, the opportunities, the environment, the beauty, and also the culture, the neighborhoods and things like that. And that central quality of life, people have seen that decline precipitously over the last 5 or 6 years, and maybe even longer. They want to get back to that. They're desperate to be optimistic about the city again. But again, it's going to have to be sustained, visible progress before voters really believe it.
Who wants to connect the dots between the research findings and the fact we have this unprecedented number of openings on the city council for the election that's coming right up?
Yeah, well, I'll give you a try here to kind of thread that needle. There is a correlation, obviously. The city council's historic lows, as Andrew said, down in the low 20s in terms of their favorability. I've been doing this a long time, and I've never seen it like that. So there is a sour mood out there against incumbency, and I think the four that chose not to run again did it for various reasons. They weren't all connected to voter reaction. Some of them had been working there a long time. Some of them are just tired of the work itself. And then, the others are soured on the political environment, excuse me, in City Hall. I think one thing I mentioned about Andrew's numbers too here is that I attribute the uptick to feeling a little bit more positive to Mayor Harrell. His positives are driving some of that. Plus, they have seen visual evidence of progress on homelessness for the first time in years. And I think that's also giving people a little bit of hope that finally someone is on top of the issue.
And why, what do you attribute Mayor Harrell's approval rating to? What's he doing differently that previous mayors haven't done in the last couple administrations?
Well, I'll offer my opinion. I think Andrew's probably got one too. So, but I think it's a combination of still being new, and secondly, again, as I said, they're seeing some visual progress on issues that are really of concern to them, and also he's talking about the issues that are concerning them, not just homelessness, but public safety too.
Yeah, and Tim's right. I do I do have opinions. I think it's also, and this is, voters sent a signal in the last cycle. He's not viewed as an ideological progressive, right? He's viewed as a pragmatic, results-oriented progressive. And voters are just incredibly frustrated about our inability to solve these problems. And so what they really want is not the most ideological progressive. They want someone who's coming from a place of progressive values, but is delivering results on the ground, making progress on the things voters are telling us over and over and over again that are most important to them. And it's the perfect time for someone like Mayor Harrell.
Okay. And so then in terms of the current city council and that, the 20% approval rating, what is it that got them? I mean, is it the pandemic? Is it the continuing homelessness? I mean, what's the issue that's got the council in such low ratings at this point?
Yeah, it's really job performance over time. These issues, like Andrew pointed out, homelessness has been at the top of the concern for people for 5, 6, 7 years now, and they haven't seen progress. So the one consistent there has been the city council's lack of work and significant progress on the issue as well. So I think that's just gotten people to be cynical about the city council. Secondly, I think there's been a tendency with recent councils to have performative politics, to be grandstanding ideologically on big issues that aren't necessarily immediately related to the basics of city governance. And they want them to get results on the issues that are important to them. Then they'll allow the city council to do all the big issues that they want, but they're not seeing progress on the basics.
Yeah, and I think Tim brought up a really good point on another call where he talked about we've had a series of candidates who are telling the voters what's most important rather than listening to the clear message from voters about what's most important to them, right? And so, some of it is the voters feeling ignored by the council.
And how much of this is a symptom of politics in general on the national level, particularly the national level in terms of the last 6 or 7, 8 years, in terms of what the city council how it's functioned?
Well, it's definitely influenced things. I mean, particularly around the civility issues in politics in Seattle. Having demonstrations at council members' homes, personalizing issues with attacks on their integrity. Those things didn't used to happen here, and I think they're attributable to the divisiveness of politics nationally and the effect that Trump's had on public discourse in this country. And honestly, too, some of that's been generated locally. I think Sawant, has encouraged that kind of behavior from her followers, particularly in disruption of city council proceedings. So that's all contributed to it.
And yeah, I totally agree. And I think, before you used to be able to kind of come together, have civil, maybe disagree, but have civil discourse and come together somewhere in the mushy middle to deliver results and outcomes. And I think that's just, it's a challenging time to be able to have those conversations without kind of being seen as one extreme or the other. There is no kind of middle ground these days.
And in terms of downtown specifically, but in terms of the city in general, has the whole district focused or district based council elections, has that been a success or a failure here in 2023? What's the diagnosis at this point?
Well, I think it's hard to say. I don't think it's hard to say. It's hard to say whether it's been a success or a failure. It definitely has changed the political dynamic. I think one thing that has occurred is, we were talking about this the other day, is that it used to be when members were elected at large that the neighborhoods had a very negative view of downtown. They felt that the cities spent an inordinate amount of time focused on those issues, and all the money tended to get spent on downtown related issues. Since districts, though, and I think Andrew's polling, and he should speak to this, shows that now suddenly the neighborhoods are as concerned about downtown as the people who live in the downtown district are. And that's a change. And I think it's attributable to districts, because when they were at large, like I said, they were all accused of focusing on downtown. But now that every district and neighborhood has their own council members, they feel more secure about their representation at City Hall.
Yeah, I think that's a super smart point, and one that I hadn't considered before. I remember not that long ago when one of the frames in Seattle elections was downtown versus the neighborhoods, right? That was a battle line that we fought in all the time, and it just doesn't exist anymore. And Tim's absolutely right. The concern about downtown and the success of downtown isn't just in downtown Seattle, it's all of Seattle and broader King County. And I think, the conventional wisdom has been a little slow in catching up to that reality. But that is a definite benefit of districts to our politics, because now we fight about different things, right?
So Kylie, how important is downtown on this upcoming ballot?
Well, I think, you heard Andrew speak to where the voters are at in terms of prioritizing the revitalization and recovery of downtown, and I think it's critical. We're at, no surprise to anybody, we're at a pivotal moment for downtown, and what we do, the decisions that we make, and what we prioritize are going to have a lasting effect. Impacts on both our quality of life, our civic pride, and our the economic health of our region and our city. So I think it's absolutely crucial.
Makes sense. Now, in terms of compared to the previous elections and the previous election cycles where the candidates are telling the voters what to think, help give me a sense, a flavor of what a successful candidate will look like in this upcoming election for Seattle City Council. What's the profile that's emerging from who's already thrown their hat in the ring, or the way the political winds are blowing?
Well, from my perspective, I think the overarching theme here for candidates running is competency in terms of convincing voters that they can do the job. In elections past, we saw that mostly the debate was around ideological lines about who was the most progressive and who would be the most progressive champion on the city council. Today, that's not the conversation with voters. Voters are asking, how are you solving the problem? What's your plan? We haven't seen a plan from the city council. How are you going to do this? So that's number one. Secondly is, I think, the point that Andrew brought up, which is instead of telling voters what they should care about, smart candidates in this election are aligning with voters' opinions and addressing the issues that they care most about, which are homelessness and public safety and affordability and downtown recovery and economic recovery generally in the city. And those are the candidates that I think are going to be successful.
And I would also just add in, Tim, to that point, I think more than ever we're seeing, given what we know about the current council's approval ratings, I think, now more than ever, somebody that is seen as, yes, pragmatic and cares about results, but also a little bit of an outsider. It used to kind of be that, experience working with the council or working at the city, was seen as additive. And I think now we're in a much different environment.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I
Yeah,
really agree with you.
Yeah, and I would just add that the mayor has a lot of political capital right now.
I mean, typically outsiders come in when they want to shake things up. You're saying outsiders are going to come in and shake things down, essentially? Kind of the opposite?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. They're getting back to the basics of governance of the city, because that's what people want to see. And the point about the mayor is right. I think you're going to see a lot of candidates saying, I align with the mayor.
Yep.
I'm with the mayor on that issue because of his high popularity, but also he's right. He's got a plan. And that's what voters are looking for, is somebody who's got an idea about how to solve these problems.
Yeah, there's a broad cart and horse problem here that's happened. Like, you can get to the more ideological kind of performative politics if you've taken care of the basics first. And what's happened over the last 10 years is, government's responsibility to make you feel safe, not just downtown, but in your own neighborhoods, and to help provide a city that you're proud of and you want to come downtown and experience the quality of life and all of the great things culturally that are downtown. If you have those things taken care of, then you can start to talk about other stuff. But what's happened, we went from a period of what I call, the practical progressives or the results-oriented progressive. That's how you used to run for office in Seattle for a long period of time. And then we got more into the ideological progressives. And I think that finally ran its course in the last cycle, and people were like, they finally saw the breakdown in the basics in the city. And they're saying, no, you got to take care of this. And we don't want to hear about all the grandstanding. We want you to do the basic job. And I like the way you described it, Felix.
I honestly, I'm not completely obsessed with history, but I can't remember a time when the mayor and the city council were working in close harmony on any kind of consistent basis in decades. I mean, that's been a really long time. And maybe that's a part of that larger national shift. Sure, they've come together on certain specific issues here and there, but there hasn't ever been this sense of like, a majority party rule, or a sense of like having the same party in charge of the White House and Congress. Haven't felt that with City Hall, unless I'm completely forgetting some recent part of history. Let's go to a question from one of the attendees. It's from Ken Lederman. He says, should city council candidates be asked to take a firm position on returning city employees to working downtown? If not full time, then at least 3 days a week. Would that issue resonate with voters both downtown and in other districts?
I think so. I think we should absolutely pose that question. The bottom line is the public sector is a major employer downtown, and just as we are urging other major employers downtown to bring their folks back to 3 days a week or more, I think we should hold the public sector to that same standard.
I do want to point out, though, that the city has been requiring their employees to be back in the office 2 days a week already, and that's more than almost any other employer downtown. The mayor's talking about pushing that to 3 days. So I do think they're trying to lead the way on that, but obviously, and Kylie's right, a lot more needs to be done.
What are other issues like this that are sort of not exactly litmus tests, but are stuff that's going to be important in terms of downtown recovery for this next crop of city council members?
Well, I'm just going to say it's the fentanyl crisis. We have to address it. You can't feel necessarily great about walking downtown when in every vacant doorway there's someone doing fentanyl or selling it or whatever. And it's apparent to everybody. So it starts there. People have to feel welcome and safe coming through and back to downtown.
Yeah. I think the other big piece here is trust and economic uneasiness. So trust has been broken with the voters, the city council and the city council. And so they're very hesitant, and people are feeling concerned about downtown's economic future and their own personal financial situation. And so they're really going to want the city to demonstrate that it can do better with what it already has, and that it can come up with an effective plan to address these issues. Nobody believes that the city council has an effective plan to address homelessness and public safety. And this is a really generous city, but they're feeling more economically squeezed and concerned than they have in a long time.
And of the candidates that have already announced that who will be running, do you already see sort of natural voting blocks forming? Is there a way to characterize like what the city council might look like next year? Is there are there two sides? Is there one side? I mean, if we get away from the extremes, it's going to be more subtle and nuanced, but there's got to be some kind of difference between the various blocks. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it's a fair statement. And, it's impossible to predict what's going to happen. I mean, I think the voters are in a sour mood. So they're looking to shake up City Hall. They took a shot at it last election cycle when they brought in Sarah Nelson and Mayor Harrell. There's the candidates are kind of lining up a little bit differently. I mean, there is a group that are emulating the Nelson Harrell approach to winning the election and governing. And then there's a group of candidates that are kind of sticking with the old progressive roadmap, and still using the same language and same approach. So I think the voters are going to have real clear choices as a result.
Is there anything that we've seen in other West Coast cities that might be an indicator of where Seattle's headed in terms of the political future?
I mean, we do polling in the Bay Area, and I will say, it's the same suite of issues in San Francisco. I think it's much more intense there than it is here, and much more in kind of a crisis mode. But yeah, we see similar issues down there.
And in terms of the people who are choosing to run, why would anyone? I mean, make this a pitch. If someone's out there in the audience and is thinking about running for city council, this notion of being more reasonable, less extreme, less ideological, more focused on getting things done, make an appeal. Why should someone run for Seattle City Council this year?
Well, things are changing. Okay, this is a tough one, Billy. Sorry.
Oh, no, don't say that. No,
Oh,
wait.
but candidates are on this call.
Okay.
No, it goes back again to being on a member of the city council used to be something that was prestigious, and it was, successful people sometimes felt that they needed to do community and public service, so they ran for the city council to contribute their expertise and knowledge and abilities. We kind of got out of that somehow, and suddenly we became a council of community activists that all had a single issue or a certain ideological approach they wanted to bring to governance, and weren't really focused entirely on the management of the city and the services that it provides to the people who live here that make it such a great place to live. Also, the civility problems in politics that were brought to the council, and I'm going to lay it right on Sawant, for changing that dynamic, really turned a lot of people off. And they said, why would I put up with that? Why do I want people in red t-shirts screaming at me when I'm sitting at the dais trying to vote, or showing up at my house, protesting and calling my family names or defacing my home? That's not a great advertisement for running for office. But what happened here in last election cycle, when Ann Davison, the mayor, and Sarah Nelson won, they won on more moderate centrist approaches and addressing these difficult issues on public safety and homelessness. I think it's given a new crop of candidates some hope that we're moving this dynamic back to where it should be, and we're going to be focused on city governance and problem solving. And again, I'm going to give a lot of credit to Mayor Harrell. He has brought a new attitude to City Hall about being able to get things done again, and I think that's attractive to people.
Yeah, I think that's the big opportunity there, as we've all said, meeting voters where they're at. So if you're a candidate and you agree that public safety, downtown revitalization, affordability, all are top priorities for you, and you've got ideas for how to achieve those or make those issues better, there's an opportunity here to get some things done in a collaborative way with the executive office.
And, the council has focused on different issues over the years, and there's been an ebb and flow to Seattle council history. Is there sort of a short version of the history of the last 10 years or so that gets us to this point, aside from the stuff we've already covered, like the divisiveness of politics or the grandstanding and that sort of thing? Can we look to a more recent time where there was successfully problems were addressed by a council and mayor working together? Cricket noise.
I have a prejudiced opinion about that.
Of course you do. We all do.
Everybody would like to hear me pontificate on the success of the Nichols administration. I'd be happy to do it. I'm
But that's what
of what we accomplished back then. And I think it changed dramatically after he lost his reelection, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I 100%, 100% agree.
That Tim is just grandstanding.
That's always implied. Come
I
on.
mean, if you want me to spend the next 15
No,
minutes
no.
listing off all the accomplishments, I'm happy to do it.
No,
I-
it's more just sort of like, I mean, because there's all these, these things that are beyond everyone's control, whether it's the pandemic or whether it's, the national political scene that's caused so much upheaval in the last nearly decade now. But everyone's always had this sense, a lot of people, that Seattle's different. We live here because of the quality of life. There's Seattle nice. People are nicer to each other. We tackle problems. We've accomplished huge things in the past, whether it was the World's Fair 61 years ago, or some of the other big infrastructure projects that have been successful. But I mean, is that gone now after this most recent epic, or and kind of these issues of trust that we're talking about, can that all be addressed in one election cycle, or are we talking about many years of trying to digging out of what some people think we're in right now?
I don't think
No,
it's gone. Oh, go ahead,
Go
Tim.
ahead. No, Andrew.
Oh,
Go
okay.
please.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, as I was saying earlier, I think there's a real pent up demand to be optimistic again. But voters are also wary for really good reasons. But yeah, I don't think it's gone. I think there's as voters continue to see progress, but they're going to have to see visible progress. We'll see those right direction, wrong track numbers get better.
Yeah, and I'm going to say too, I think we can still do big things, and we will. I mean, we tackled the viaduct and took it down and built a tunnel, and now look at the waterfront. It's fantastic, going to be fantastic.
Yep.
We're building light rail, even though we're having troubles with some of the projects on light rail. It's getting built, it's opening, it's out there, and it's changing the face of this city. And when we build the West Seattle to Ballard alignment, that is going to be a significant change in how this city both gets around, but how it grows in the future. So yeah, we will do big things, but people want confidence in their governance. And as I said earlier, they're looking for competency. They're not looking for the performative politics anymore. They want people that can do the job. And it will take a cycle or two, but we saw progress just from this last cycle. And I think we're going to see that momentum carry forward in this one and through into the next one. And then maybe we'll be over that cliff.
Yeah.
Well, because this year is so, I mean, kind of historical in terms of how many seats are up for grabs. I think we do have the potential to make a pretty big leap in terms of seeing that change.
And so as we speak, are there sort of backroom meetings taking place to try to recruit specific candidates, or try to kind of shape the city council election the way, kind of the old days where there's sort of not a block of candidates or being specifically recruited, but is there sort of stuff gone behind the scenes that we should all know about to kind of know what to expect?
No comment. Yeah, I mean, there's people all working on this, recruiting candidates, talking, encouraging people. It's not a single block or a movement or anything like that. I just think there's a high level of interest in the city to ensure that we have really good candidates in every district. And I think that's happened. I look at the field that's getting set right now, and I see really good candidates in every single district and very competitive races in every single district. So I think that mission has been accomplished, and now it's on to elections.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point to your question, Felix, about can we get out of this? That's really strong evidence that we can. So for a number of cycles, the complete dysfunction on the city council made people who really care about moving the city forward and want to solve problems and give back saying there's no opportunity to do that on the current council. And so the crop of candidates who were available and interested was very narrow. And we already see just based on the past cycle that the field is going to be much, much stronger.
Does it seem like there's already a healthier relationship between City Hall and the business community than there was a few years previous?
Well, Kylie, I think you should probably respond to that. On behalf of DSA, I can know that the people that I work with, yes, they feel that there's a much stronger relationship with this administration than we have seen in the last 6-8 years.
Absolutely, I would agree with that, and the relationship I think between the mayor and the mayor's office and city council has also strengthened, which means that, if we're aligned with the mayor, we have a much better chance of getting something done.
Let's get another question here from our audience. Ed Lee says, Sawant survived a recall vote not that long ago. Is there anything in the polling or another indication that would say that voters in her specific district have changed their views and will vote for a different type of candidate this time around? Great question.
It is a great question, and we're going to find out come August and November. I don't know the answer to that. I think that's who's the beneficiary of the Sawant vote. And is it stay together and elect a single candidate, or does it get divided up? You've got a field of candidates. What is it, 9 there now, that are across the political spectrum in terms of who they're appealing to. So I think that's probably going to be one of the most fascinating primary races in the city.
Yeah, and I also feel like, her surviving her last election and the recall, there were some unique factors there, and that it was overinterpreted as a sign of strength. She's actually, she was always more unpopular citywide, or for a long time, than she was in her district, but that changed. And she became very unpopular in her district. But, there were turnout dynamics in a special recall election that, helped, and other things that happened in her previous election.
Well, it's worth noting that it was not a landslide. That survived that recall effort. So I think that's notable.
Yeah, and it's still a really strong coalition, particularly in that district.
I want to make sure, the audience knows too, that, as we're talking here about how there's shift in the political momentum in the city right now, no one should think there's a shift ideologically in how voters think and feel and the kinds of solutions they're looking for. They're still really progressive, and they want to have really progressive solutions to these difficult problems. But the difference today, like I've said a couple of times, is they want competency from the people that they're electing.
Yeah, Tim.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Tim's absolutely right. More, roughly 2/3 of Seattle voters identify themselves as progressives. They still do. I like to say Seattle is still Seattle. The values have not changed.
Well, more people identify as socialists than Republicans in Seattle. So,
yes,
that's where we're at.
And there's a long history of not only activism, but also activists running for office and sort of reform candidates coming in to kind of shake things up. And that grassroots connection that Seattle's had with politics and with City Hall goes way, way back. But it seems like this is an ebb and flow, or a pendulum swinging one way or the other. And this might be a very, I don't know, like a non-activist or non-grassroots kind of election, or successful candidates will be much more of the get things done, non-ideological variety. Say that we do get Mayor Harrell and a bunch of aligned council members who really want to address issues and solve problems. This is kind of an adaptation of a question coming from the audience. What do you see as like the 3 initiatives, the things that are going to get pushed forward, along with some of the obvious stuff we talked about, like public safety and that sort of thing? What are some of the other things you could see that kind of very aligned council and mayor pushing forward in the coming years?
Well, if I were those guys, I'd be careful what I ask for. I mean, when you have a governing majority plus a mayor that's all aligned, you have no excuses. You need to get the job done. So that'll be the test for the voters. Is they're going to again want to see progress on their top issues, not the issues that necessarily the council wants to play with over on the side. So they're going to be measured on progress on public safety and homelessness and affordability and downtown recovery. That's going to be the report card. So any initiatives that come out better focus in those areas.
Yeah, and if I were to say what is the one metric I would be watching as an elected, is do voters think quality of life is improving? Because quality of life is an umbrella issue that covers homelessness, and it covers public safety, and it covers downtown recovery and all of those things. So if voters don't feel like quality of life is improving, or you've got an initiative that's not really in that domain, voters want the basics taken care of again and get back to the city they love.
Is there any appetite for big dreams, like, I don't know, the equivalent of the World's Fair, or some, I don't know, what sports team don't we have yet? Or what stadium haven't we built yet? I guess we still want to get the Sonics back. Do you think there's no appetite for someone trying to, as long as they're getting the basic stuff done, for pushing some big dream type stuff?
Sure there is, but you got to show you can take care of the problems first.
Yeah, you gotta start with that, yeah.
And, I don't know what the next big initiative might be that someone's thinking about. There are people talking about Linden I-5, for instance. That'd be fantastic to knit the city back together again. Can we pull together the resources to do that? I don't know. But there are still people dreaming big in this town. And I think when we have competent governance again, then the public is going to be able to support those kind of big dreams.
I have a question from the audience about which specific candidates are campaigning on their ability to pragmatically tackle the big issues related to quality of life. I like that. I like the specificity.
Yeah, no kidding. Which candidates? I want to give you my list of recommendations.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, that's why you're here.
The C-slate.
Don't hold
That's
back.
right. Yeah, I'm not going to put that on anybody. Sorry, there is no C-slate. I like some of these people to actually win. So
the mark of Tim has been made on these candidates. So here's the slate, folks. You know who to vote against now.
yeah, we know what the negative campaign is coming against them now. Yeah.
Well, and I would just say you can stay tuned for our upcoming DSA. We'll be conducting a process. We don't as an organization make formal candidate endorsements, but we will be conducting a process where we release a candidate scorecard, and that is really based on how answers to a questionnaire about how they align with our organization and our priorities for downtown.
Yeah, and I'll mention a few names for people to keep an eye on. I think that to me look like they could really break through here. I think over in District 1, Rob Saka, I think he is really demonstrating his abilities out there. There's another guy, Preston Anderson, that looks pretty good too. Both of them bring a good experience. Over in District 2, Morales is going to get a run for her money with Tanya Wu. That's going to be a really good race, I think. In District 3, like we talked about, it's wide open. But I think Joy Hollingsworth and Alex Hudson look strong over there. District 4, I like Maritza Rivera. And District 5, I think we just saw a recent entrance by Kathy Moore, who's a very experienced former Superior Court judge who, again, is kind of an example of a different kind of candidate that's looking at this race again. She wants to come back and give civically again. And, over in District 6, you've got a really strong challenge to the incumbent Strauss by a guy named Pete Henning, who used to be a business owner and is the executive director of the Fremont Chamber over there. And then in District 7 downtown, you've got Andrew Lewis, who, he's really strong. We'll see if there's a candidate that can challenge him. At this point in time, I'm not sure there is.
Is the infrastructure there to accommodate sort of the communications and the electioneering infrastructure for voters who are busy with their own lives, trying to run their businesses and take care of their families, to be fully informed as possible about the different candidate choices? I mean, there's so many candidates in the field. This has far-reaching implications. I mean, it's in some ways, it's even more important than a presidential election because it impacts you right here where you live. Is a system in place in terms of the questionnaires and the organizations releasing their findings or their recommendations, debates, that sort of thing, of City Club, League of Women Voters? Is that infrastructure still around, or with social media seems to have blown up so much of that stuff? How does a kind of a half-informed voter get more informed in this coming cycle?
Well, it can be difficult. I mean, people are busy and they're doing a lot of different things, and most people don't focus on politics like this window of people do. There are still, forums and questionnaires and all that goes on, just like it always has. They're a lot more district-based now than they used to be. So the big overarching efforts by City Club and League of Women Voters don't necessarily apply here anymore, and they've kind of withered on the vine a little bit. But within the districts, yes, that does happen. The other thing that's changed the dynamic is the spending limits and contribution limits. I mean, in the primary, the spending limit per candidate is about $96,000. And that's not a lot of money. to communicate with voters. So what it's forcing candidates to do is get back to grassroots. You know, the candidate that's going to probably emerge is the one who knocks on the most doors, and really gets out there and meets with voters one-on-one or in small groups.
Yeah, and I would say out of a bad thing, you know, good things coming out, which is voters are so concerned about quality of life, and it really is central for why most of us are here, that they're sitting up and paying more attention. And I think there's some evidence of that from the last cycle. Just, you know, the frustration, concern has really brought us together, which is not the way you want to come together. Seattle is a town that doesn't have a lot of range in its ideological diversity, so we tend to argue like partisans over small policy differences. And I've never seen, you know, I've been polling here since '94. I've never seen the degree of alignment that we have now around, you know, solutions for, you know, policies to address homelessness and public safety and other things. I've never seen this level of alignment, because when you have a lack of ideological diversity, a really overeducated, smart population, we like to argue, we like to be right. And we have a form of consensus for Seattle right now that is a real opportunity to move the ball forward on these critical issues.
Interesting. Can we talk a moment about the King County measure that's on the ballot next week?
Yeah. What do you want to know?
What should a smart voter know about that measure?
Vote yes.
Yep.
I will say from other research, we know that voters recognize they want an all hands on deck solution to these challenges that we're facing, both addressing root causes and short-term solutions that, you know, emergency interventions, and, you know, even statewide voters, you know, not just the big cities, recognize that addressing behavioral health issues is critical to getting a handle on this challenge.
And so, what's DSA's position on this, Kylie? And what's
we have endorsed the crisis care centers levy and urge everybody to, one, remember to vote, and two, vote yes.
okay? Audience question about you know, everyone saw the news about REI closing their location in downtown Portland, or they're planning to close it down, I guess. You know, and there's grocery stores have had to allocate many more resources for security guards, which are expensive. I mean, there's been a lot of sometimes, like, you know, the sky is falling kind of reaction to these sorts of things happening, where it's a very specific reason why something's closing in Portland. How do you see this shaping, like, the coming election, these sort of reactions to these sort of kind of micro decisions that seem to kind of, everyone throws their hands up? How does this fit into the coming election cycle? Is this sort of not an issue in terms of Seattle because we're talking about Portland? Or how do you address these sorts of things that if you're only half paying attention, you hear REI has closed their store in Portland, you're worried they're going to close the store in Seattle. How do these common sense candidates who are coming forth for this next election, how do they address stuff like this?
I think it's all about the basics in terms of public safety and you know, vibrancy downtown and return of retail and more foot traffic. I mean, I think that's the as I said earlier, the decisions that we make there over the next bit of time here is going to drive whether or not we see more you know, companies, retailers leaving the downtown area.
You know, and I think voters have a concern that they see what happens in Portland or San Francisco or LA, and they say, well, that could happen here, or maybe we're on that path too. And I think they want to hear from these candidates about what their plans are, again, so that doesn't happen in Seattle. That we stop the slide, and I think we have. And we've got a plan for revitalization now, and we need candidates to embrace that.
Yeah, and because of the disproportionate volume of some voices in Seattle, there's this weird conventional wisdom that Seattle is somehow anti-business, and it's just not true. And, you know, the public survey we do for the chamber, the index, we ask this question about what would most impact or help improve quality of life. And in the top 4 or 5 is always helping local businesses deal with public safety concerns. Voters recognize how critical that is to bringing back downtown, and they want downtown to come back. They want to go back down to the new waterfront park or to Pike Place Market or to restaurants or shows and all of that.
Well, I hope that this is going to bring a change in City Hall, and I think it has with Mayor Harrell, but a change in our attitude towards business downtown in particular. You know, the loss of people being in the office, it should demonstrate to everybody the value of having that much employment downtown and what it brings economically to this whole city. And so our attitude about those big employers should change back to being supportive of business in downtown rather than how the council in years past before COVID, attacked Amazon and attacked large business downtown. And I think that was a huge mistake. And this demonstrates why it was a huge mistake.
Yeah, and Tim, and it's not just economically, because that has follow-on effects on the culture, right? What's the cultural opportunities that are available downtown, because the workers aren't there to support them, right? And so even if I don't work downtown, that affects me because I don't have as many options downtown.
And I mean, it seems like there's opportunity on both sides to sort of kind of meet in the middle in terms of the polarization between the business community and certain city council members a few years ago. It seems like it's sort of there's some middle ground there, because nobody wants to see the city able to be characterized by certain people like, oh, it's, city council's in the hands of big, business owned city council, like big business is pulling all the strings of the city council. No one wants to see that. I mean, they want to sense that like the big businesses are contributing to to the infrastructure and to solving problems, and there's dialogue. And I guess in the most divisive time, a few years, even before the pandemic, it looked like there was no dialogue. It was just, people kind of saying their opinions in the media or social media and not really meeting to really try to work things out. So, because otherwise, if we swing too far the other direction, then you'll get just another backlash of activists saying like, City Hall is owned by Amazon.
Right.
Am I overstating or am I oversimplifying that?
In a bit, but not much. I mean, if anybody owns City Hall, it's been, folks on the very progressive side who've been able to push a pretty strong agenda through the city council in recent years. So yeah, I think balance is necessary, absolutely, and a dialogue is part of that. And we're going to see a different city council no matter what happens here. Which way this political pendulum swings, the people that were part of that process a few years ago are going to be gone, and the new office holders will have a chance to reset on those relationships, and I think they should.
Yeah, and I want to reframe it a little bit, because I talk about how the frustration with the failure to deliver on the basics has really aligned voters more so than I've ever seen. The business community, what the business community wants and what voters want, no different.
That's right.
They want homelessness addressed. They want public safety addressed. They want affordability addressed for their workers, businesses, and voters want that too. And they want downtown to recover and thrive, right? It's the same set of priorities. So it's not really doing what the business community wants, it's doing what voters want.
See,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like so much of this stuff, it comes down to storytelling and dominating the narrative. And in the recent past, the narrative has been dominated by loud voices that weren't solving any issues. They were just loud voices. And so I want to hear loud voices loud and articulate voices explaining and persuading me about why we're doing things and why it's the right thing to do, given the challenges facing us, or given the opportunities that we have to seize, given that we're this this wonderful city of Seattle that we all love. So I guess it's go ahead.
I'll give a rural metaphor for our city problem. Voters are tired of all hat, no cattle, right? You really are going to have to demonstrate, and kind of the most stark number in all our data, like the trust numbers for the city council are abysmal, as is the favorable, but the numbers are even more negative on have an effective plan to address the critical problems facing the city. And it's like, in what other job could you exist when your people don't believe you can do the most important thing?
Yeah, I'm not sure what marching on the spheres is a solution for, but it seems to be the outlet recently.
Well, we're almost out of time here. There's one more. I want to bring up the King County question again. It's a good audience member question. It says, what happens if that measure doesn't pass? Although nearly everyone knows this is needed infrastructure, the continual tapping of property taxes to pay such things may make this a closer vote than one anticipates. So what if? That's a great question. Who wants to take that?
Well, I mean, I don't know what the solution is otherwise. I mean, this is the most critically underfunded service there is right now. And it's been critically underfunded for decades. And we're paying the price for that. And we're paying a huge price for it, more than what this property tax levy is going to cost. So I think people have to look beyond that and vote yes on it, because it is progress towards solving the mental health crisis is playing out on the streets of our downtown and every neighborhood business district that's out there too. This just isn't a downtown issue. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And I'm hopeful. I see a lot of signs in the data that, and not just in Seattle and King County, but statewide, that the voters are ahead of the electeds on this and really recognize it. Now, when there's economic uncertainty, that's always a wild card, but they certainly understand the importance of this. So we don't have to convince voters of that.
Mhm.
I mean, I do take the point though about stuff being sort of seeming kind of piecemeal sometimes, and these different organizations and different levels of government offering solutions that people get to vote on or get to weigh in on. And it rarely feels like it's all orchestrated in a way that with one message that is clear and all coordinated. So hopefully there's potential there. So we are almost out of time. I want to thank our panelists, Tim Cease, Andrew Tebow, and Kylie Rolfe. We have a few seconds. Give us your hot take on what to look for in this coming election. You got give me 5 seconds of election forecasting. What's the biggest takeaway? If you had one takeaway to take away from this morning's discussion, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say something that was already said. I'm going to be looking for the candidates who are responding to what the voters have been saying over and over again is important to them.
Kylie?
I'd say, it's our intent here at DSA to do our part to make this election all about public safety and the importance of downtown from both a vibrancy perspective and an economic one.
Tim?
We'll see if the momentum continues from the last election cycle where Harrell and Nelson and Davison got elected, and see if that continues on.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, DSA, for organizing these virtual access programs. Thanks to all the fabulous DSA staff, John Scholes, Sally Wright, James Cito, Simon Villanueva. And please mark your calendar and plan on joining us on Thursday, May 18th. We'll be discussing the Downtown Seattle Activation Plan, learn from urban leaders in other markets about other revitalization efforts. So keep an eye on your inbox for more information about that. Or get anything more about this series or all the great programs that Downtown Seattle Association offers, you can go to downtownseattle.org. Until then, I'm Feliks Banel on behalf of DSA, and thanks for joining us this morning, and release the Kraken, as they say, and we will see you all downtown.
Thanks, Felix.